Sister Agnes had lived in the old stone convent for as long as anyone could remember. The building stood on a quiet hill just outside a small town, surrounded by tall trees that swayed softly year after year. Life there moved slowly. The days were simple, filled with morning prayers, small tasks around the grounds, and the peaceful silence that many people only found on retreats. But for Sister Agnes, this quiet life was normal, almost like breathing. She was 82 years old, though she never made much of her age. She walked with small, steady steps and kept her hands folded when she wasn't helping with chores. Most people in the convent saw her as gentle and calm, always ready with a warm smile or a comforting word. She was never the loudest in the room, but always the most patient. Even when disagreements happened among the younger sisters, she was the one they would go to when they wanted someone to listen. The convent itself held many memories for her. She could remember the days when the dining hall was filled with dozens of voices, when the pews in the chapel were always full, and when visiting families brought noise and laughter to the courtyard. Those days slowly faded as the years passed. Fewer people joined the convent, and many of the older sisters had passed away or moved to care homes when their health declined. Sister Agnes remained, not because she felt trapped, but because it was the only home she had ever truly known. The chapel was her favorite place in the entire building. It had tall windows that let in soft light during the morning, and in the evenings, the candles reflected off the old wooden pews. But the part of the chapel she cherished most was the piano pushed up against the far wall. It was an old upright model, scratched in several places and faded from years of use. Most of the younger nuns thought of it as a decoration, something that had lost its purpose long ago. They only dusted it during weekly cleaning, and sometimes placed flowers on top dot, but for Sister Agnes, the piano was more than a piece of furniture. It was a reminder of a life she rarely spoke about, a life filled with music. Long before she entered the convent, she had once played the piano every single day. It had been a part of who she was, almost like her heartbeat. But many years had passed since she had played in front of anyone. Time changed her roles, her responsibilities, and her confidence. She kept the memories close, tucked inside her heart like old letters. Most of the younger sisters had no idea she could play at all. They knew her as kind, helpful, and quietly wise, but nothing more. Every now and then, one of them might hear her humming while she arranged flowers or swept the hallway. She never hummed loudly, but the melodies were always gentle, like something carefully chosen. Some sisters wondered where she learned them, but they never asked. Life in the convent rarely changed, but that was how the sisters liked it. Each morning began with the soft bell that echoed through the halls. Sister Agnes would rise early, long before dawn, and sit for a few minutes on the edge of her bed, letting her thoughts settle. Her room was small, just a narrow bed, a desk, a window with thin curtains, and a little bookshelf containing a few worn prayer books and a simple wooden cross. She didn't need or want much else. Every morning she followed the same quiet routine. She washed her face with cold water, tied her gray hair neatly, and put on her habit with slow, careful movements. Then she walked to the chapel with the help of her cane. She never rushed. She liked the calmness of early morning when the hallways were empty and the air felt cool. Often, when she reached the chapel, she would glance at the piano. Sometimes she would pause for a second, almost as if she wanted to walk over and touch the keys. But she never did. Instead, she took her usual seat in the front pew and closed her eyes, letting the stillness settle around her. The other sisters respected her deeply, but they didn't know much about her past. They only knew the small things she allowed them to know: how she liked chamomile tea, how she was always the first to comfort someone who was upset, and how she gently encouraged the younger nuns to be patient with themselves. She had an old-world grace that made people feel calm just by being near her. But despite her peaceful presence, Sister Agnes often felt a quiet ache in her heart. It wasn't sadness exactly, more like a longing, a memory that never fully left her. Sometimes, when the chapel was empty, she would sit near the piano and rest her hand on the wooden top. She could almost hear the music she used to play echoing in her mind. Her fingers would twitch slightly, as if remembering the movement, the rhythm, the stories she once told through sound. She wondered if anyone would ever understand how much music had shaped her life. She had never spoken about it because she didn't want to draw attention to herself. She had joined the convent with the hope of living a simple life, free from pride or praise. But what she didn't realize was that hiding her gift for so long had slowly made her doubt whether she still had it at all. There were days when she told herself she was too old to play now. Her hands felt weaker, and her fingers weren't as quick as they once were. She convinced herself that her time for music had passed. Even if the piano still worked, even if someone encouraged her, she believed she would only disappoint herself. The fear of trying and failing kept her from lifting the wooden cover of the keys. Still, the desire never fully died. It stayed inside her, warm and quiet, like an ember that refused to go out. Most days in the convent were predictable, and Sister Agnes welcomed that. She helped in the garden, watering the plants and trimming the rose bushes. She worked in the kitchen when needed, peeling vegetables or drying dishes. She visited the elderly residents in the town's small care home once a week, offering prayers or simply holding someone's hand when they were lonely. The younger nuns often admired her dedication. Many of them entered the convent with restless hearts, unsure of how to let go of their old worries or the noise of the world outside. But when they spent time with Sister Agnes, they felt steadier. Her presence had a way of reminding people to slow down and breathe, yet even they did not know the weight she carried, the quiet disappointment she felt in herself for abandoning the music she once loved. There was one moment every day that she looked forward to more than any other. After evening prayers, when the convent settled down and the halls grew silent, she would return to the chapel for a few minutes of solitude. She didn't always stay long. Sometimes she only sat in the pew with her eyes closed, listening to the sound of her own breathing. Other times she would whisper short prayers, asking for guidance or strength. And always, without fail, she would look at the piano. One evening, she allowed herself to sit on the small bench in front of it. She didn't open the cover or touch the keys. She simply sat there, staring at the worn surface. Her reflection in the polished wood was faint, but she could see how much older she had become. Her hair was silver now, and her hands looked fragile. She let her fingers hover above the keys for a moment, not touching, just remembering. She breathed in slowly, almost hearing the beginning of an old melody rising in her mind. But fear stopped her. She withdrew her hand and clasped it tightly in her lap. That night, when she returned to her room, she lay awake for a long time. She wondered if she had been foolish to give up something she loved so deeply. She wondered if she had let fear of judgment silence her. She wondered, quietly, if she had wasted a gift that once brought her so much joy. But she also knew that life in the convent was not about showing off or proving talent. It was about humility, service, and kindness, things she had tried her best to uphold her entire life. Still, the music remained. It never left completely. Even when she tried to ignore it, it returned in small ways, through the songs of birds in the morning, the rustle of leaves on a windy day, or the soft humming that escaped her without realizing. The world beyond the convent walls had changed greatly over the years. But inside, time felt slower, safer. She had grown comfortable in that routine, even if it meant letting go of pieces of her past. She told herself she didn't regret anything. Yet sometimes, especially on quiet evenings, she wondered what might have happened if she had continued playing. even just for herself. Little did she know that the days ahead would soon challenge everything she believed about herself. Something unexpected was coming, something that would take her beyond the walls she had lived within for so long. The piano she loved but avoided would soon become the center of attention, not just in the convent, but far beyond it. But for now, Sister Agnes continued her quiet life, unaware of how close she was to being seen in a way she had not been seen in decades. She simply went about her days, carrying the soft echo of music in her heart, not realizing that the world would soon hear it too. The change in the convent began quietly, almost without warning. One morning, just after breakfast, the sisters gathered in the courtyard to meet the new administrator who had been assigned to oversee the daily operations of the convent. It wasn't unusual for someone new to arrive. Over the years, different administrators came and went, each bringing small changes that the sisters eventually adapted to. But this time felt different from the very beginning. The new administrator, a middle-aged man named Daniel, arrived with a stack of folders under one arm and a clipboard under the other. His steps were quick, his eyes sharp, and his voice confident. He greeted the sisters politely, but his tone carried a sense of urgency, as if there were many things he needed to correct right away. The sisters exchanged small glances, not sure whether to be excited or nervous about his arrival. Sister Agnes stood quietly in the back of the courtyard, hands folded neatly as she listened. She didn't judge him right away. She had lived long enough to know that some people simply spoke in a firm way, even if they meant no harm. Still, she could feel something unsettled in her chest as he spoke. Daniel began explaining that he had been sent to help update the convent's management system, review their safety procedures, and make sure the building was in good condition. Most of his words sounded harmless enough. The sisters nodded along politely, trusting that he knew what he was doing. But then he added something that made several of them stiffen. "I will also be reviewing all unused or unnecessary items in the building," he said. "Anything that is old, broken, or no longer serving a purpose may need to be removed." The sisters murmured quietly among themselves. Old items? Unnecessary? The convent was full of old things. Almost everything in the building had been around longer than the younger nuns. Furniture, decorations, tools some dating back decades. Sister Agnes didn't speak, but she felt a small ache forming. Her eyes drifted toward the chapel door, though she wasn't sure why. Perhaps she already sensed the trouble that would soon follow. Over the next few days, Daniel walked through the convent with a notebook, checking each room with careful attention. He examined the dining hall, the kitchen, the storage closets, and the prayer rooms. Every so often, the sisters would hear him muttering to himself, scribbling something on his clipboard. The younger nuns tried to stay out of his way, but they whispered among themselves that he seemed strict. Not unkind, but strict, efficient, determined to make everything look new and modern, even though the convent was meant to be a place of simplicity. One afternoon, while the sisters were preparing for evening prayers, Daniel stepped into the chapel. His footsteps echoed across the wooden floor as he scanned the room. His eyes moved from the pews to the stained glass windows, then finally to the piano against the far wall. He walked toward it with curiosity, running his fingers across the scratches and faded edges. The piano had not been played openly in many years, and it showed its age. The color had dulled. A few keys were chipped. The stool wobbled if someone sat on it too quickly. Daniel frowned. He wrote something on his clipboard. The next morning, he called a short meeting with the sisters in the dining hall. They gathered around as he stood at the end of the table, looking serious. "There are several items throughout the convent that need to be removed for safety reasons," he said. "One of them is the piano in the chapel." The room fell silent. Even the younger sisters, who rarely paid attention to the piano, looked surprised. One of them finally asked, Is it dangerous? Daniel tapped his clipboard. It's unstable, outdated, and takes up unnecessary space. No one uses it anymore. It's best if we remove it as soon as possible. I've already contacted someone to come and take it away this week. Sister Agnes felt something in her chest tighten. She kept her eyes lowered, but the words struck her deeply. Remove the piano. Remove the piece of her past that she had kept quietly by her side all these years. She didn't speak at first. She didn't want to sound emotional in front of everyone. But as Daniel moved on to another topic, she slowly raised her hand. Her voice was soft. May I say something? The room grew still. The sisters turned their heads toward her. Sister Agnes rarely spoke during meetings, so when she did, people listened. Daniel nodded politely. Of course, sister. Go ahead. She hesitated for a moment. It had been years since she had spoken about the piano in any serious way. She wasn't sure how to explain why it mattered to her without revealing too much. I believe the piano is still of value, she said gently. It may look old, but it has been part of our chapel for a long time. Perhaps it could stay a little longer. Daniel smiled politely, but shook his head. I understand your concern, sister, but the decision has been made. The piano is no longer needed. It's better for the chapel to remain uncluttered. And besides, we wouldn't want anyone to strain themselves trying to play it. Sister Agnes felt the sting of those words. Too old, too fragile, too weak. She knew he didn't mean to sound insulting, but the message was clear. He assumed she couldn't possibly have a reason to care about it. He assumed she couldn't play. She folded her hands in her lap. May I play it once before it is removed? She asked quietly. Her voice was gentle, but her heart felt heavy. She wasn't even sure she could still play well. It had been so many years. She didn't know if her fingers still remembered. But she couldn't bear the thought of the piano being taken away without touching it one last time. When she asked this, the younger sisters looked at her with surprise. A few of them exchanged confused glances. They had never heard her talk about playing the piano before Daniel cleared his throat. I appreciate your request, sister, but I must strongly advise against it. At your age, playing an old instrument might strain your posture or cause discomfort. I'd rather not risk any injury. There it was again, too old, too fragile. He didn't say it directly, but the meaning was the same. Sister Agnes lowered her eyes, not wanting anyone to see the disappointment behind them. She didn't argue. She only nodded politely. The meeting continued, but she barely heard the rest. That afternoon, she visited the chapel alone. The late sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, painting soft colors across the floor. She walked toward the piano, touching its wooden edge gently. Her hand lingered there. She whispered more to herself than anyone else. Maybe it's for the best. But the words did not feel true. Later that evening, some of the younger nuns approached her quietly in the hallway. Sister, one of them said softly, we didn't know you wanted to play the piano. Sister Agnes smiled gently. It was a part of my life long ago. I suppose I kept it to myself. Another asked, do you still remember how to play? She paused. I'm not sure, she admitted. It has been many years. My hands are not as strong as they once were. The younger nuns exchanged sympathetic looks. They could see how much the piano meant to her, even if they didn't fully understand why. In the following days, Daniel continued preparing for the piano's removal. He scheduled workers, measured the doorway, and made notes about how to move it safely. Each time he passed through the chapel, he barely glanced at the instrument, seeing it only as something old and inconvenient. But Sister Agnes saw it every day with growing sadness. She visited the chapel more often than usual, sitting quietly in the pews and letting her memories drift. She didn't dare touch the keys, not after Daniel's warning. She didn't want to cause trouble. Still, each time she walked away, She felt a sense of regret. One evening, after everyone had gone to their rooms, she remained in the chapel longer than usual. The candles flickered softly. The air was cool. She stood beside the piano, resting her hand on it once more. She thought about her younger years, the small apartment where she first learned to play, the teacher who encouraged her, the music that once filled her life with joy. She remembered the moments when playing had made her feel alive, connected, free. A tear welled in her eye. Though she quickly brushed it away, she whispered, "I wish I could play again." But she believed she couldn't, not anymore, just then. Someone cleared their throat at the doorway. She turned quickly. It was the visiting volunteer, a kind man who helped with small repairs around the grounds every few weeks. He had arrived earlier that day to fix some lighting in the hallways. Somehow she hadn't heard him enter. "I didn't mean to interrupt," he said, stepping inside slowly. Sister Agnes offered him a small, polite smile. "You're not interrupting. I was just remembering." He followed her gaze to the piano. "It's a beautiful instrument," he said. "A bit old, but these old ones often have the best sound." She nodded quietly. He hesitated and asked gently, "Do you play?" She opened her mouth, unsure how to answer. Finally, she said softly, "I used to." There was a long pause. Then the volunteer stepped closer, studying the piano more carefully. He pressed a single key. The note rang out slightly out of tune, but still warm. "I could tune this," he said thoughtfully. "It wouldn't take long." Sister Agnes shook her head. "It's being removed soon." He frowned. "Removed?" She nodded. "The administrator says it's old and unnecessary." The volunteer looked at her, then at the piano, then back at her. Something in his expression changed curiosity, mixed with concern. "May I ask?" He said gently, "Why does it matter to you?" Sister Agnes took a slow breath. "Because," she said in a whisper, "it was once a part of who I was." The volunteer said nothing at first, but as he looked at her, he understood more than she expected. And in that quiet chapel, everything began to shift slowly, gently. But enough to change what would happen next. The volunteer stood beside Sister Agnes in the quiet chapel, the soft glow of the candles reflecting off the piano's worn surface. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The room felt still, almost like it was waiting for something. Sister Agnes kept her hand resting gently on the top of the piano. Unsure of what to say next. The volunteer, whose calm nature made him easy to talk to, stepped a little closer and ran his fingers across the piano's wooden frame. He didn't touch the keys again. He simply looked at the instrument with a kind of attention most people rarely gave it. "I've seen many old pianos," he said quietly. "Some sound rough, some barely work, but most are worth saving. This one has character." Sister Agnes gave a small smile. "It has been here for longer than I have." He looked at her with curiosity. "And how long has that been?" "Over 60 years, she said. "I joined the convent when I was very young." He raised his eyebrows with gentle surprise. "That's a long time to be in one place." "It is," she agreed softly. "This building has been my home." He studied her expression. "And the piano, was it always important to you?" She hesitated, unsure whether she should share something so personal. Most of her life had been spent in service and in silence. She rarely talked about her past, even with the sisters she lived with. But something about the volunteer's gentle interest made her feel safe. "Yes," she said at last. "I used to play every day, long before I came here. Music was a large part of my life, but I haven't played in many years." He nodded slowly, as if understanding more than she expected. "And now they want to take it away." She looked down at her hands. "Yes, they say it's too old and takes up space." He tapped the piano's side thoughtfully. Old doesn't mean useless. Sister Agnes looked up at him with a faint sparkle in her eyes, though it faded quickly. They think I'm too old, too, she said quietly. At least, that is how it feels. The volunteer's face softened. He didn't offer empty comfort. Instead, he simply stood in silence beside her, allowing her feelings to settle in the air. Finally, he asked softly, "Would you play something now if the piano were tuned?" Sister Agnes felt her breath catch for a moment. The question stirred something inside her that she had tried to keep buried for years. "I don't know if I can anymore," she admitted. "My hands are not what they used to be. My memory. Perhaps it is not as sharp." The volunteer shook his head. "You won't know until you try." She gave a small, sad smile. "The administrator doesn't want me to." "Then he doesn't have to know," the volunteer said softly. With a hint of mischief she didn't expect, Sister Agnes blinked at him in surprise. "I'm not suggesting anything wrong," he added quickly, smiling. "I just mean the piano won't hurt anyone if it's played for a few minutes. And I can tune it myself. I've done it many times." Sister Agnes looked at the piano again. The idea of playing made her heart beat faster. She wasn't sure if it was excitement or fear. "Would you like me to tune it?" he asked gently. She whispered, "Yes." The volunteer smiled warmly, as if he had been hoping for that answer. The next morning, after the sisters began their daily routines, the volunteer quietly returned to the chapel with a small toolkit. Sister Agnes wasn't there at first. She didn't want to draw attention or cause trouble, but curiosity, mixed with a quiet longing, pulled her back to the chapel. After a short while, she found him sitting on the floor beside the piano, carefully opening the front panel to reach the tuning pins. He worked slowly, checking each string, gently tightening or loosening them as needed. She stood near the doorway at first, unsure if she should interrupt. He looked up and smiled. "You came." She stepped forward. "I wanted to see how it was going." "It's going well," he said. "It's in better shape than I expected. A bit dusty, but solid. Whoever played it years ago must have treated it kindly." Her heart warmed at the unspoken compliment. She sat on the nearest pew and watched him work. Each time he tapped a key to test the pitch, she felt something stir inside her, a memory, a feeling, a longing. She folded her hands tightly in her lap, trying to calm the nervous energy rising in her chest. After almost an hour, he closed his toolkit. "It's ready." Sister Agnes looked at the piano, then at him. "What now?" He smiled. "Now you play." Her breath trembled. She slowly stood, gripping the pew for support. As she approached the piano, her steps felt both heavy and light. Heavy with fear, light with hope. When she sat on the bench, she felt the familiar wobble beneath her. The old stool creaked, just as it always had. She placed her hands on her lap and stared at the closed cover of the keys. "You can open it," the volunteer said softly. Her fingers trembled as she lifted the cover. The white keys, slightly yellowed with age, waited for her. Like old friends she hadn't spoken to in years, she rested her fingertips on the keys. Barely touching, the volunteer stood back, giving her space. For a moment, the world seemed to pause. Sister Agnes closed her eyes. She let her mind travel back to her childhood, to the tiny room where she first learned to play, to the teacher who believed in her, to the afternoons she spent practicing melodies that made her heart feel full. Her eyes opened. She pressed a single key. A soft note filled the chapel. Her breath shook, but her hands remained steady. She pressed another key. Then another. The sound echoed gently through the room, carrying memories she thought she had lost. She began to play a simple tune, one she had learned when she was very young. The melody was soft, like a whisper, but as she continued, Her fingers grew more confident. The volunteer watched in quiet amazement. He had expected her to be hesitant, unsure. But what he saw was something different, something deeper. Her hands moved slowly but gracefully across the keys. The music flowed out like water, smooth and steady, filled with feeling. She didn't look at the volunteer. She didn't look at the piano. She simply let the music guide her. For the first time in years, she felt alive in a way she had forgotten. When she finished the simple tune, the chapel fell silent again. She stared at her hands, her eyes filling with tears. I didn't know I could still do it, she whispered. The volunteer stepped closer. It's still inside you. You didn't lose it. She wiped her cheek with the back of her hand. Thank you, she said softly, for tuning it, for encouraging me. He shook his head. You did the hard part. I just opened the door. She looked back at the piano, a gentle smile spreading across her face, but the moment did not last long. Footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. The volunteer quickly closed his toolkit. Sister Agnes straightened, her heart racing. The chapel door opened. One of the younger sisters stepped inside, blinking in surprise when she saw Sister Agnes sitting at the piano. Sister, she said softly, I heard music. Was that you? Sister Agnes opened her mouth to answer, unsure whether she should feel nervous or proud. The younger sister's eyes shone with genuine amazement. It was beautiful. Sister Agnes felt her cheeks warm. We always wondered if you knew how to play, the young sister added. But we never imagined, well, that you could play like that. The volunteer smiled quietly from behind her, staying out of the center of attention. More footsteps followed. 2 other sisters entered the chapel. We heard something. One said, it sounded like music. Was it you, sister? Their eyes were filled with curiosity and warmth. Sister Agnes felt overwhelmed. She had spent so many years hiding her gift, unsure whether anyone would care about it, unsure whether she still had the ability. But now, in this quiet chapel, surrounded by the gentle faces of her sisters, she realized something. The music inside her had been waiting, waiting to be heard, waiting to return. The young sisters encouraged her with soft smiles. Will you play again? One asked. Sister Agnes's hands trembled slightly, but not from fear this time. She took a deep breath. Yes, she whispered. I think I will. And as she placed her fingers on the keys once more, none of them, not even she realized, that the quiet moment unfolding in their small chapel would soon ripple far beyond the convent walls. It was the beginning of something none of them expected, something that would soon reach the world. The afternoon sun settled softly over the old convent chapel, sending warm light through the tall windows and painting long beams across the wooden floor. The air inside was still, almost expectant, as if the room itself sensed something important was about to happen. For many years, this space had been used mostly for quiet prayer, small gatherings, or moments of silence. But today felt different. Today, something long forgotten was coming back to life. The piano stood at the front, its dark wood polished by time rather than care. The visiting volunteer had spent nearly 2 hours gently tuning it, tightening strings, checking the pedals, and pressing each key to make sure it still carried sound. The notes were not perfect, but they were warm, full, and honest. They held the kind of character that only age could give. When he finally stepped back and wiped his hands on a cloth, the chapel felt charged, as if the air had thickened with anticipation. A few nuns stood quietly near the back, whispering among themselves. They had never seen the piano used for anything meaningful. It had always been more of an old decoration than an actual instrument. But today, everything was different. The volunteer walked over to the hallway and called out gently, Sister, it's ready. His voice echoed softly through the halls. Soon, slow steps approached. Sister Agnes appeared in the doorway, her small frame almost blending with the wooden arch behind her. She moved carefully, not out of fear, but because age had taught her to respect every step. Her hands were folded in front of her, and her eyes held a soft curiosity, mixed with a quiet bravery. She had not touched a piano in years. Not because she had lost interest, but because life had slowly created distance between her and the instrument she loved. Responsibilities, routines, and time had pushed music aside. And now, after so many years, she wasn't sure what would happen when she sat down again. The volunteer gave her a warm smile, encouraging, but not pushy. "Take your time," he said. She nodded, her expression gentle, and made her way toward the piano. The other nuns watched silently, unsure of what to expect. Some of them had heard her humming when she walked through the halls or prayed in the chapel, but they had never imagined anything beyond that dot when she reached the piano. She paused, lightly touching the edge of it with her fingertips. The wood was cool at first, but it warmed beneath her touch. She closed her eyes for a moment, breathing in deeply, as if greeting an old friend. The volunteer pulled out the bench, but Sister Agnes shook her head softly. "I can do it," she whispered. She lowered herself onto the bench slowly, her hands trembling just slightly. Not from fear, but from the weight of memories pressing gently on her shoulders. The keys were in front of her, lined like a row of tiny doors waiting to be opened. She lifted her hands above them, then let them hover. She did not press down right away. Instead, she simply allowed herself to feel the moment the scent of wood and dust, the faint echo of the tuning that had just taken place, the warm light falling across the piano lid. Finally, she pressed the first key dot. It was a single note, but it rang clearly through the room, rising into the air like the start of something long buried. She pressed another key, then another. The sound deepened, grew richer, and soon she played a small cluster of notes. Letting them form a soft chord, the nuns exchanged glances. The volunteer held his breath. Then, without warning, something seemed to awaken inside her daughter fingers, though aged and thin, began to move with surprising grace. She shifted into a melody soft at first, then fuller, rounder, more confident. The tune seemed familiar, like something from a distant time, but none of the nuns could place it. Her shoulders loosened. Her face softened. Her fingers found their rhythm, and then she truly began to play. The melody transformed from gentle notes into a sweeping arrangement, filled with emotion and depth. It wasn't just music. It was a story slow beginnings, hopeful rises, quiet falls, and then a burst of something bright and strong. Her hands moved in patterns that did not match her age. They moved like someone who had spent a lifetime speaking through keys instead of words. The chapel filled with sound. It felt alive again. One nun covered her mouth, stunned. Another stepped forward slowly, unable to take her eyes off the elderly woman at the piano. The volunteer stared, almost forgetting to breathe. Sister Agnes did not look up. She did not seem aware of the room at all. In that moment, she was somewhere else, perhaps in her youth. Perhaps in the early mornings she had once spent practicing, or in the days when music was her language. Her comfort, her prayer. Her body, though frail, moved with a steady flow. Her hands glided effortlessly up and down the keys. Her foot pressed the pedal when needed, creating long, beautiful waves of sound that filled every corner of the chapel. It was not just skill. It was soul. The music lifted, fell, then lifted again. It carried an emotion that words could not explain. It was like watching a flower bloom in fast motion, or seeing a person you thought you knew reveal a hidden part of themselves. The nuns felt something shift inside them, something warm, something hopeful. Many of them had never thought deeply about Sister Anne's past. To them, she had always been the quiet, gentle elder who helped in the kitchen, tended to the garden, or offered comforting advice. They had never imagined this side of her. When the song reached its highest point, the notes shone bright and full, echoing across the ceiling. It was as though the sound itself had color golden, almost glowing, filling every corner of the old chapel with life. Then slowly the melody softened. It drifted down into a gentle ending, fading like the last light of sunset. When she released the final note, it hung in the air for a long moment before disappearing into the stillness. No one moved. The chapel felt sacred in a new way. Sister Agnes finally lifted her hands from the keys. They trembled slightly, but her face was peaceful. A small smile appeared, soft, humble, almost shy. "I hope it was not too loud," she whispered. The nuns let out small laughs, not because the comment was funny, but because they were overwhelmed. One of them wiped a tear from her cheek. "Sister," the volunteer finally managed, his voice thick with emotion, "that was incredible." He wasn't sure the word even came close to describing what they had heard. She looked down at her hands, surprised. "It has been so long," she said. "I did not know if they still remembered." "They remembered," a younger nun said, stepping forward. "We had no idea you could play like that." Sister Agnes gave a modest shrug. "It used to be my joy," she said softly, "before life became busy, before I let it slip away." "You didn't lose it," another nun said. "You only tucked it away. And today you brought it back." The volunteer couldn't help but ask, "Sister, where did you learn to play like that?" She hesitated for a moment, then answered gently, "Long before I came here, music was a large part of my life. I taught, I played. It was something I shared with others." She paused, thoughtful. "But after I joined the convent, I chose a simpler path. Music felt like another world. I did not think it needed me anymore." "But we need it," a nun said, her voice warm. "We need this." Sister Agnes looked touched. She didn't reply right away. The soft afternoon light settled on her face, highlighting the quiet gratitude in her eyes. The volunteer walked closer. "Sister, would you mind if I recorded you playing again? Not for anything big, just to show a few friends. I think people would truly appreciate this." She seemed uncertain. "I do not wish to cause trouble," she said. "You won't," he replied gently. "Sometimes a little beauty can brighten many lives." The nuns nodded in agreement. Their expressions were kind, encouraging, hopeful. Sister Agnes thought for a moment, then gave a small nod. "Only if it is not a burden," she said. The volunteer smiled. "Never." She placed her hands back on the keys. This time she breathed more easily, as though the first performance had washed away the years of doubt. She began to play again another melody, different from the first, but just as full of emotion. The volunteer lifted his phone quietly, making sure not to disturb her. The camera recorded as her hands glided across the keys. The nuns watched from the side, standing close together, some with their hands over their hearts. The music carried through the chapel once more. Outside, birds perched on the window ledge seemed to pause, listening. Even the air felt warmer, more alive. When she finished, the chapel was silent again, filled with awe. This time, Sister Agnes did not ask if it was too loud. She simply smiled, the kind of smile that came from deep inside, a smile of rediscovered joy. And though none of them realized it yet, the simple recording taken that afternoon would soon travel far beyond the quiet walls of the convent. It would reach people from every corner of the world, people who would hear not just music, but the story of a woman who had waited a lifetime to be heard again. The video of Sister Agnes playing the piano was never meant to go anywhere beyond a few friends. The volunteer who filmed it simply wanted to share a beautiful moment, something gentle and uplifting in a world that often felt loud and rushed. He posted it with a simple caption that said something like, "A peaceful moment from a quiet chapel." There were no dramatic words, no hint that something extraordinary had taken place, but the internet has a way of finding things that touch the heart. Even when they are shared quietly. Within the first hour, only a few people watched it. They left comments like "so calming" and "this is lovely." By evening, a few hundred people had seen it. Most of them didn't know who she was or where the video came from. They just knew the music felt like a warm light. By the next morning, thousands had watched it. And by the end of the week, it had been shared so many times that the convent's small email inbox was overflowing. The nuns were shocked. They had never imagined something from their quiet little home would reach people from all over the world. They gathered around an old computer in their office, leaning close to the screen as messages came in one after another. "This brought me to tears. Who is this lovely lady? Her hands move so gently. You can feel her heart in every note. Please share more of her music." Some messages came from people who were sick and said the music helped them relax. Others were from stressed students who played the video while studying. Some came from faraway countries the nuns had never visited and never expected to hear from. One nun looked over at Sister Agnes, who stood quietly in the doorway, unsure of what all the fuss was about. "People love your music," she said warmly. Sister Agnes gave a soft laugh, almost embarrassed. "It is only a little tune," she said. "A little tune that touched many hearts," another nun replied. The volunteer stopped by the convent again that afternoon. He looked a little overwhelmed himself. "Sister," he said with a smile, "do you know your video has more than 1 million views?" She blinked slowly. "1 million?" she repeated, as if the number was too large to be real. "Yes, and people keep sharing it. They want to know more about you." Sister Agnes shook her head lightly. "I am no one special," she said. "That is what makes it special," he told her. Over the following days, reporters reached out. Some wanted interviews. Others wanted to visit the convent and film more. The nuns gently turned all of them away, explaining that the convent valued peace and privacy. They didn't want cameras filling the quiet halls or reporters turning their lives into a spectacle. But the world kept watching. Musicians wrote to offer help. Some said they wanted to restore the chapel piano for free. Others offered to send a new one. Someone even offered to pay for music recording equipment so Sister Agnes could share more songs. The nuns gathered in the dining hall one morning to talk about all the requests. The room smelled of warm bread and tea, and sunlight streamed through the small window. Sister Agnes sat at the end of the table, her hands gently folded. "We cannot let this become too big," one of the older nuns said. "The convent is not a stage." "But maybe we can still share something modest," another replied. "People seem to feel comfort from her music. And comfort is a small gift we can offer the world." Sister Agnes listened quietly as they spoke. She didn't want fame. She didn't want attention. But she did understand the power of music, the way it could soften a heavy heart or calm a restless mind. Finally, she spoke, her voice steady and warm. "If anything we share brings peace to others," she said, "then perhaps we should not hide it. But I only wish to play in the same spirit I always have with humility. Not for praise, not for applause, only for the joy of it." The room fell quiet as her words settled into the air. "Then that is what we will do," the head nun said gently. A few days later, the volunteer returned with a small tripod and a simple camera. He set it up in the chapel, making sure it didn't look intrusive. There were no big lights, no fancy equipment, only a tiny camera standing quietly in the corner. "Whenever you're ready," he said. Sister Agnes sat at the piano with the same calm expression she always carried. She didn't dress differently, didn't fix her hair, didn't try to perform. She simply placed her hands on the keys and began to play. This time she chose a soft, soothing song, something gentle and comforting, like the sound of a quiet ocean or a breeze passing through trees. The nuns sat nearby, listening with peaceful expressions. They had come to love these moments. When she finished, the volunteer uploaded the recording to the convent's small online page. Again, there was nothing dramatic in the caption. It simply read, "Another moment of music." Within hours, it spread. People commented things like, "Her music feels like a hug. This is the peace I didn't know I needed. Please tell her thank you from all of us. Whoever she is, she healed something inside me today." More views poured in. More messages arrived. More people wanted to know her story. Some started calling her the gentle pianist. Others called her the hidden master. Someone wrote, "She plays with the wisdom of a lifetime." But the title that stuck the most was the Silent Star, a name that reflected how quietly she carried her gift out despite all the attention online. Life inside the convent stayed simple. Mornings were spent tending to the garden, sweeping walkways, preparing meals, and helping the community that lived nearby. Sister Agnes joined in every task without any change in her manner. She kept her routine, her habits, her calm. Nothing in her behavior hinted that millions were watching her. Videos, but the world outside kept growing more. Curious, messages came from music. Teachers saying they wanted their students to watch her as an example of patience and discipline. Choir directors said they played her videos before rehearsals because they set a peaceful tone. Parents said they played her piano pieces to help their children sleep. Nurses wrote to say they played her music in hospital rooms. Sister Agnes listened to these messages with amazement. "I never imagined such things," she said softly one afternoon. "I only hoped someone might find a little peace." One day, an email arrived from a well-known musician who specialized in restoring old instruments. He wrote that he had seen the video and felt moved by the sound of the worn piano. He wanted to restore it at no cost. His message was kind, respectful, and humble. The nuns showed the message to Sister Agnes. She ran her hand along the piano's fading wood. "This piano has lived a long life," she said. "Its voice is old but beautiful. If restoring it lets it sing more clearly, then perhaps it would be a good thing." So arrangements were made. A small team came to the convent, not with loud tools or flashy equipment, but with gentle hands and soft movements. They treated the piano like something sacred. They opened it carefully, cleaned it, replaced old strings, polished the wood, and made small repairs. When they were done, the piano did not look new. It still had the charm of age. But now the keys responded more smoothly, and the sound carried a rich tone that filled the chapel with warmth. Sister Agnes sat down to test it. The first chord she played echoed like a soft bell. The nuns stood behind her, smiling. "It sounds wonderful," the volunteer said. "It feels the same," Sister Agnes said softly, but lighter, "like it has taken a deep breath." The restored piano seemed to open a new chapter. Sister Agnes began to play more often, not for videos, not for attention, but because the piano felt alive again. The nuns came to the chapel whenever she played, some sitting on the pews, others standing near the doorway with quiet smiles. Meanwhile, the online audience only grew. People wrote from everywhere. "I listen to her every morning before work. Please, tell her her music helped my mother rest peacefully. Her gentle hands remind me that age is not the end of beauty." It became clear that this was no longer just a viral video. It was a movement of quiet comfort. One evening, as a group of nuns cleaned up after dinner, the head nun approached Sister Agnes. "People ask if you would ever share more of your story," she said gently. Sister Agnes paused, thoughtful. I am not sure what to tell, she said. Only what you feel comfortable sharing, the head nun replied. Nothing more. Nothing less. Sister Agnes nodded. Perhaps one day, she said softly. For now. She preferred to speak through music. And so the world listened, not knowing that the most extraordinary moment was still to come. A moment that would surprise even this convent itself. A moment that would soon lift Sister Agnes from quiet fame to something far beyond what anyone expected. The news that Sister Agnes's videos were reaching millions never quite settled in her mind. She heard the numbers, she heard the stories, she heard the messages. But the idea that her music traveled far beyond the walls of the old convent still felt unreal. To her, she was simply playing the way she had always played, quietly, honestly, without expecting anything in return. But the world had a way of carrying simple things to unexpected places. One morning, the head nun stepped into the chapel, where Sister Agnes was gently dusting the piano. Sunlight glowed around her like a soft halo, and her hands moved with slow care. May I speak with you for a moment? The head nun asked. Sister Agnes nodded and set the cloth aside. There is something we think you should see, the head nun said. She led her to the small office where the nuns kept their old computer. The volunteer was there too, standing beside the desk with a calm but excited expression. On the screen was an announcement from a well-known international foundation that supported music programs for underprivileged children. They had seen her videos and wanted to help the convent host a small concert, something quiet, respectful, and streamed online so people everywhere could listen live. They want to raise funds. Sister, the volunteer explained. Not for fame, for charity, for good work. They think your music could bring hope to many people. Sister Agnes blinked slowly, surprised. A concert? She whispered. She looked at her old hands, then back at the screen. I am not sure I am strong enough for such a thing. You don't need to be strong, the head nun said gently. You only need to be yourself. And you won't be alone, the volunteer added. We will keep everything simple. No stage, no crowds, only a camera, only your music. Sister Agnes took a deep breath. She had lived a long life, and she had learned that sometimes unexpected paths appeared, even when one felt too old for surprises. Perhaps this path, too, had been placed in front of her for a reason. Very well, she said, her voice warm but steady. If my music can help others, I will play. The news spread quietly, but quickly. The foundation made a small announcement online, and thousands of people marked the date on their calendars. Not because they expected a grand performance, but because there was something comforting about her presence, something humble, something genuine. Inside the convent, life continued as usual. The nuns tended the garden, prepared meals, swept floors, and helped the nearby community. But in the background, a gentle excitement grew. The chapel was tidied more than usual. A few simple flowers were placed near the altar. The piano, freshly restored, stood ready. The volunteer checked the camera setup several times, making sure everything was perfect without being intrusive. Sister Agnes practiced a little each day, not to polish her skill, but to warm her hands. She chose melodies that felt peaceful, gentle, and full of heart. Songs that spoke without words. Finally, the day of the concert arrived. It was a quiet morning. Soft clouds drifted across the sky. The chapel felt warm and welcoming. The nuns dressed simply, just as they always did. There was no stage, no fancy decorations, no audience filling the pews. Only a few chairs at the back for the sisters who wished to sit. The volunteer positioned the small camera in the corner, angled perfectly toward the piano. The foundation representative sat quietly near the door, respectful of the sacred space. "Whenever you're ready, sister," the volunteer whispered. Sister Agnes walked slowly toward the piano. She wore the same calm expression she always had. Her steps were steady. Her hands trembled just slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of the moment. She sat down, breathed deeply, and looked at the keys. The chapel fell silent. Then she played. The first notes floated out like warm air. They reached the microphone, traveled through the camera, and began streaming across the world in real time. Thousands of people sat in their living rooms, kitchens, bedrooms, offices watching quietly. Her music carried a softness that made people pause whatever they were doing. Some closed their eyes. Some smiled. Some felt tears gather for reasons they couldn't explain. Inside the chapel, the nuns stood still, their faces glowing with pride and tenderness. The volunteer swallowed hard, trying not to show how moved he was. Sister Agnes played with the same peaceful heart she always carried. Her fingers moved slowly, but surely, her body swaying gently with the rhythm. The piano's restored voice filled the chapel with warmth. She moved from one melody to another, each one telling a different stories she had carried inside her for decades. Stories of joy, loss, hope, patience, faith. Outside the convent, people listened from all over the world. The chat beneath the live stream filled with soft messages. Beautiful. She plays like she's speaking to the soul. I needed this today. Bless her gentle heart. When the final song began, it was slower, more emotional. A tune shaped like a farewell and a thank you at the same time. Her fingers moved delicately, as if touching memories. The last notes lingered in the air longer than expected. The chapel felt like it was holding its breath. When she lifted her hands from the keys, the room remained silent. Not in emptiness, but in awe. The volunteer turned off the camera with trembling hands. The live stream ended, but the impact had just begun. The nuns approached Sister Agnes with warm smiles. Some hugged her carefully. Others touched her shoulder. The head nun wiped away a tear. You gave the world something beautiful today, she whispered. Sister Agnes lowered her gaze, touched. I only gave what I had, she replied. Later that evening, the foundation representative returned with news. Sister, he said, the concert raised more donations than we ever imagined. Enough to support music programs, instruments for children, and community centers around the world. The nuns gasped softly. Overwhelmed. Sister Agnes placed a hand on her chest. All from a little music? She whispered. All from a little light, he answered. Days passed. The concert replay was shared everywhere. People said they listened to it daily. Some said it helped them fall asleep peacefully. Others said it helped them study, pray, or heal. Sister Agnes returned to her quiet routine. She tended the garden again. She helped in the kitchen. She prayed in the mornings and evenings. The only difference was that now the world listened when she played. The convent received letters filled with gratitude. Children sent drawings of pianos. Adults sent messages about how her music had touched their lives. Hospitals wrote to say they played her songs for patients who were anxious or scared. One day, as she walked along the convent garden path, a young girl and her mother arrived to visit. The girl held a small keyboard in her hands. Are you the lady who plays the piano in the videos? The girl asked shyly. Sister Agnes nodded with a gentle smile. The girl held out her small keyboard. Can you teach me a little? She asked. The mother looked embarrassed. I'm sorry, we don't want to trouble you, she said. But Sister Agnes shook her head kindly. It is no trouble, she said. She knelt down, showed the girl how to place her fingers, and taught her a simple melody. The girl played it slowly. Her eyes sparkled. That is very good, Sister Agnes told her. Remember, music is not about being perfect. It is about letting your heart breathe. The girl nodded seriously, as if someone had just given her a precious secret. Dot, as they left, the head nun approached. "She will remember that moment for the rest of her life," she said softly. "So will I," Sister Agnes replied. With time, the online noise settled, but the respect people had for her remained. She never chased attention, yet her videos continued to circulate quietly. Finding new hearts every day. The piano became a symbol of kindness and simplicity. The convent became known as a place of peace. And Sister Agnes, though she never thought of herself as anything extraordinary, became a gentle reminder that talent and purpose do not fade with age. One evening, as the sun set behind the chapel windows, she sat at the piano again. She played softly, alone this time, letting the notes drift into the quiet air. She smiled to herself, not thinking of the millions who had heard her, not thinking of the concert, not thinking of anything big. She played because she loved it, because even after all these years, the music still lived inside her. And somewhere in the world, someone would hear it and feel a little more hope. In her heart, that was enough.